Well, I'd love to say happy Monday, but we can't for obvious reasons. So we're going to settle a day early, recording Monday, midday, for an early happy new year to, as always, people's favorite guest, my coworker at the Herald, Doug Kyed, talk a little Pats. And I don't know, as always, the last few weeks, not the football itself, because I wrote about that 40-7 game, rewatched every single snap. You watched it again. It's a miserable experience, but we'll just chalk it up to one day out of 366 this year that the job kind of sucks. Because there's also one game left out of the 17 the Patriots have played, and no one knows what the hell is going to happen after that. Are you ready to dive into pretty much everything but the football?
Yeah, I think so. We also don't know what's going to happen in this final game, which we'll get into in a little bit. There's a lot of, as I think Jerod Mayo said about 15 times this morning, everything's on the table. So who knows? We might see, I don't even know. We might see Ben Brown at quarterback. But yeah, I'm ready to get into the non-football stuff, I guess. We'll see how much of it there is. There's a lot of unknowns, and I guess what happens in week 18 is going to answer those, but I don't know. Number one overall pick. If anything, I feel like the spirits are higher after Sunday's results now. Even after this week than they've been in past weeks.
Yeah, I say this because folks who listen on Mondays expect full film review. It's me hanging out with myself. I just couldn't do it. We're going to do a version of Andrew drinks alone and talks to himself probably next week at some point. It's the end of the season. Everyone deserves a beer, especially after the holidays. But today we are going to go backwards in a way, just to hit quickly on what did happen Saturday in the fallout, because my column after that was just to say, look, if Mike Vrabel wants to come to New England, and that's a guy who will have interest from a lot of different franchises with head coaching vacancies coming up, the Krafts should give him the job. And you and I, even in the 48 hours since that game started, that prompted that column, we'll talk about it because we haven't actually talked about it since. We have Jerod Mayo's comments this morning, which, shocker, there are some more question marks after he gave some answers that didn't make a whole lot of sense. And it feels like we're picking on Jerod. But for the most part, he was short, to the point, deflected, and then just kept going with the eye. And as I said, put his foot in his mouth. Then we're going to talk about what do you want to do Sunday? Because as you said, Patriots right now, the number one overall pick. Joe Milton, come on down. And then Monday, Black Monday and beyond, what is ownership going to do this? Plus anything else. And a lot of mailbag questions because you guys are great. And if you do not hear your question answered, blame Doug, because these mailbags always get a lot bigger when I rope him in with that initial tweet of oh, what do you want to hear? So not my fault. So let's start with the Vrabel stuff, because here's why I landed. I would not fire Jerod Mayo just to fire. I still think that's scratching an itch versus enacting a solution at the end of the season. This has been an underwhelming, disappointing, terrible season for the Patriots, okay? Mike Vrabel is an outlier in two really important senses. Number one, he's a head coaching candidate with a career-winning record available on the market. That's a rare commodity at this point. Number two, he's someone that wants to be here. And I think the notion that, why would the Krafts go shopping down the aisle where it's all of their past trophies and goodies and players and coaches and just stick with the system? Mike Vrabel has not been employed in New England in 15 years. Those 15 years, more than the 8 that he played here, are the reason he's attractive. Different coaching philosophies, techniques, styles. He's done this before and beaten the Patriots twice, including knocking them out at the end of the dynasty era. And number three is just a simple fact. If anyone who runs a business, obviously not speaking from experience, if you can get an upgrade in a certain area with a certain person or position, you go and do it because it's business and this isn't personal. So to grant Jerod some grace here, the guy had 5 years of coaching experience before he became one of 32 head coaches, and now you know I'm serious, in the National Football League, okay? That guy's not supposed to succeed. He's not set up to succeed. And yeah, it's a raw deal. You get fired after 1 year. But Mike Vrabel's better than you now. He, I believe, will be much better over the near future. And I just got to a point watching that game going, Doug, I don't know what the future holds, but I have no good argument for if Mike Vrabel, who reportedly does have interest, wants to come back home, the Krafts shouldn't just jump on it because of what he will do to fix the culture issues here, raise the floor of the roster, and to have the best quarterback, by the way, in Drake Maye he had ever coached, as someone who's been to an AFC championship game, won a coach of the year, and earned the number one seed in the AFC.
Number one thing I would say is that it's been said over and over again that the plan here was that Bill would coach one more year, Bill Belichick would coach one more year, then you go to Jerod Mayo. And it's pretty clear that from year one, Jerod Mayo wasn't ready for it. Hadn't been coaching long enough, hadn't been groomed for it. It didn't work out the way as planned. And since you rushed him into the job, there's no guarantee that all of a sudden, now learning on the job, he's even going to be ready for it in year 2, year 3, whatever it is. You know what Mike Vrabel is. You know that he's ready. I think the second thing is, if you're the Krafts, you have to ask yourself, what does Jerod Mayo do better than Mike Vrabel? Or what could he do better than Mike Vrabel? And if you're struggling to come up with answers, then I think this becomes a little bit more clear. And the third thing, and probably the most important thing, is that the staff that Mike Vrabel could assemble is much better than the staff that Jerod Mayo assembled back when he became head coach in January, because he had so few contacts around the NFL. They had to kind of scramble and put pieces together, guys that, Elliot Wolf knew, guys that Alex Van Pelt knew. It wasn't a cohesive way of structuring a coaching staff. And Mike Vrabel, who's coached in Tennessee, coached at Ohio State, coached in Houston, he just knows so many more people. And he's had people under his staff before who have won football games. You know that the floor of the staff that Vrabel can put together is much higher than that of the Patriots staff right now. And the ceiling is much higher as well.
Yeah, it's just, so do you co-sign on that? Because again, we haven't talked about it, and it's a hard thing. Like, it's a big if, right? Like, this guy will have opportunities with several different franchises. He'll be able to command a salary and come in with that resume that he might be a top 10 NFL coach right as he walks in the door. And I get he had 2 losing seasons, but you and I haven't talked about it. Like, you sound on board with that notion. If he wants to come back and they're a priority, that you would do it.
Yeah, I think there's a much clearer path to winning if Mike Vrabel is your head coach in 2025. And I'm sure that the Krafts still see a lot of upside in Jerod Mayo as a head coach.
Yep.
I just haven't necessarily seen it this season, and maybe they still do. We're going to get into more Black Monday stuff later on, right? Because I do have something else to say on this. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to start there because it sounds like the easy, simple solution. And there are people, again, who would push back and be like, what's so great about Mike Vrabel? He's not God's gift to coaching, okay? But I know what he is a guy who is not going to suffer from the fundamental breakdowns you've seen on defense or the culture stuff. And I'm not talking about calling out players to the media. Like, that's not inherently a negative, right? It's not about being a conservative in-game coach. It's about a guy who comes in, had winning records right away, knows what his culture is, has the experience of doing this as a head coach. And if the Patriots do move on from Jerod Mayo, I want someone more experienced than him, or certainly someone who's been through it. And you might be, oh, what about Ben Johnson? Like, I've said this before. The analogy is a coordinator is really like the head of a department in high school. Like, you're teaching English. You're telling other people how to run that department of the entire operation. The head coach is the principal. There's not a whole lot of hands-on teaching, instruction, coaching, obviously in this case, when you're the head coach, but you're setting the expectation, the practices, the schedule, everything else about the organization going down. I know how well Ben Johnson could tell me about Shakespeare. I have no idea how he's going to set everything else from detention on down, deal with parents as a potential head coach. I know what Mike Vrabel does. I would bring him in right now. But for now, Jerod Mayo has at least one more game as head coach. This morning, he says everything's on the table for the finale against the Bills. Sunday at 1 o'clock, by the way, because that was not determined for the folks who missed it. And that includes possibly sitting Drake Maye. He said, to his understanding, Drake is not in the concussion protocol, but if he is, he would learn later today. Monday, he dismissed the notion that Daniel Ekuale brought up to me one-on-one that effort was a problem against the Chargers, and still didn't really want to talk about Ramondre Stevenson starting when he told the local radio broadcast and the national TV broadcasters that Antonio Gibson would start as a point to make about accountability. So of all that, plus the stuff that he said on EI, where do you want to start?
The effort thing, I think, is the most interesting to me because we've talked a lot about the Stevenson and Gibson thing, and I don't know. It feels like a minor thing, but it's just a bigger microcosm of everything else that's happened this season. The effort thing was just so bizarre because he said multiple times that he didn't see effort issues. It was more about execution. Didn't see effort issues, more about execution. And then Jermaine Wiggins asks him a follow-up about the Daniel Ekuale comments to you. He said, there were times when on field goal block, guys weren't getting their hands up. But for the most part, guys were trying. It's like, you either have to go all in and say, effort was not a problem. I did not see a single issue with effort, no effort issues, all execution, nothing to do with effort. Or you have to kind of own it and be like, yeah, here's an example. On field goal block, guys weren't getting their hands up. So I preached to the guys after the game, you have to try. Otherwise, you're not going to be here. Like, you either have to go all in on one direction or the other. You can't pretend like there's no effort issues, specifically bring one up and then still try to downplay it. And I don't know, all of these things are obviously minor in a vacuum, but there's just been so many instances at this point that you're just like, what are you doing? Like, it's week 17 now. You can't still make those mistakes. And I think that one thing that really struck me about it is that Mayo's now very clearly trying to do this Bill Belichick impression of say as little as possible, say he has to rewatch the film, like rely on phrases like coach's decision, say there's a lot on the table, all these things.
Best interest of the football team.
Best interest in the football team, all those different things. But as soon, literally the second that it came out of his mouth of him saying, you know, on field goal block, there was times the guys didn't get their hands up. The first thought I had was Bill Belichick would never say that. And you don't have to be Bill Belichick. Like, I thought that that was one of the positives that Jerod Mayo was doing through the first, let's say, 14 weeks of the season, is that he wasn't just trying to do the Bill Belichick thing, because it didn't work for Matt Patricia, didn't work for Josh McDaniels, didn't work for all these different guys who have come from the Patriots system. So Jerod Mayo was trying something different, and now he's kind of trying to do Belichick, but also saying things that Belichick would just absolutely never say. And that's why it's not working, because, and it goes back to the Vrabel thing, like, Vrabel has a voice. Vrabel knows how to handle the media. Vrabel knows how to handle the team. I think that that's something that Jerod Mayo is still really struggling with. And if it hasn't clicked through 17 weeks, I'm not sure if there's a guarantee it's going to click by next season either.
Yeah, and I would say it goes back earlier this season, because Lord knows this is the most overly referenced column I've ever written, and I'm the one at fault for that. Like, the media messaging was an issue back in the spring and then in the summer, and about important things like the quarterback competition and what mattered and what would factor into that decision. And then even as that went on, they pivoted to Drake Maye. It's like, oh yeah, of course the offensive line was a factor. What do you mean? Like, it's okay.
Right.
The football coaches lie to the media. I am not so sensitive. My sensibilities are not at the feet of someone telling the truth the whole time. Football coaches lie. Bill Belichick lied. Jerod Mayo has entitled to lie in the best interest of the football team. But the full quote, which you tweeted from that comment on WEEI about the field goal blocks, quote, "It's hard when you know the score kind of gets out of control to keep pushing on. And I would say the majority, most of, if not all the guys, were still going out there trying to make a play." So when you say majority, most of, if not all, we're still trying to go out there and make a play, that means some that weren't.
Yeah.
And it's not just Daniel Quale one-on-one to me. It's Jonathan Jones saying after the game, hey, when the going gets hard, we go home. We're a team that can't overcome that adversity. So I just, the importance of this is take the full media and the reporting and the listening of this and the recording, whatever it is, out of the equation. If he's this inconsistent with people who have a limited time with him, okay, asking simple questions, what is it like with the football team? Because these answers stem from what he thinks, what he believes, and when he's prepared and organized. And clearly to me, what this says is he's not organized enough or prepared enough or sticking to the same core concepts, except for the last couple of weeks. And you're like, yeah, it stinks we're not getting the same Jerod and his actual thoughts and answers, but that's his prerogative to close up, to clam up. And then he opens up again and you're going, I don't like what's inside. Like, it's just, it's bad. Drake Maye, though, being on the table as someone who might sit on Monday, good decision, bad decision. What do you think he does? What does that mean?
Well, I mean, they have the number 1 overall pick right now. I would start Joe Milton, like 100%. They're like, there's no hesitation in my mind about that. It's tricky though, obviously, because like Jerod Mayo's job might be at stake in this game. So if you're Jerod Mayo, obviously you want to go out and look as good as you can, demolish the Buffalo Bills, backups, whatever it is.
Like, I understand the point that you're making, but if beating the Bills JV team sways the Krafts, and maybe it does, because there's a real distinction here between what you and I think should happen and what will happen. What's the most likely bet? I think they should move on Mike Vrabel. I don't think the Krafts are going to fire Jerod Mayo. That's my bet right now. But like, what do you think if they win that's meaningful?
I mean, it's not to me, but for Jerod Mayo, he has to be looking at this as being meaningful. Like, he's not going to try and lose this game, because for him, he's probably just like, well, that will increase my chances that I get fired. But so unless there's some sort of agreement between Mayo and the Krafts of like, listen, we want to get this number 1 overall pick. Like, this is going to be the best thing for the future of the franchise. We got to put out Joe Milton. We got to start, Tyrese Robinson at guard. Like, we gotta just play our backups and try to get that number 1 overall pick. Unless there's some sort of agreement, then there are these factors are at odds where like Jerod Mayo wants to keep his job. Jerod Mayo wants to win, and everyone else should be trying to vie for that number 1 overall pick. Obviously, the players want to play well in this game, but no, I mean, I think that there's enough of an excuse to start Joe Milton just to say, like, we've seen enough of Drake Maye. We know that what we have in Drake Maye, he just either got concussed or almost got concussed against the Chargers. No use of risking him in this game. We want to know if Joe Milton can be our backup quarterback in the future. We want to know what we have in him. We want to know if he's a potential trade piece in the future. Let's put him out there because the Bills are also going to be playing their backup. So I think there is enough of a case to do this without being like, we're fully tanking, that it makes sense. And for me, 100%, I am doing that. You want the number 1 overall pick. You'd probably like to see what you have in Joe Milton, and you'd like to play Jalen Polk and Javon Baker and all of these guys as much as possible just to see what you have for the future.
I completely agree. You just have to ask yourself, like, what does a win Sunday matter relative to what the number 1 overall pick in the draft could become? Absolutely. Like, even if you just stick and pick, that's a guy who's there for 5 years. That's someone you're selecting as the best player in the draft, who will obviously fill a position of need, because the only positions in the Patriots roster, aside from quarterback, are positions of need. And so, or you could trade.
But what does that matter to Jerod Mayo if he's not back?
Yeah, right. Well, and that's the thing. Like you mentioned, if the Krafts and Mayo had this agreement, right. He was asked last question of the day by our guy Mark Daniels, like, have you received assurances he'll return? Here was his answer. Quote, I'm always in constant communication with ownership, and I feel like we're still on the same page. So a non-answer, but he seems to indicate, yeah, I feel like I'm going to come back, and they should absolutely start Joe Milton on Sunday. They should absolutely play the kids. They've sold this messaging from the beginning of the season. We're going to develop, find our foundational pieces. There's enough there to sell it. It still doesn't mean, though, that the veterans in that room know what's going on. And any cultural fissures right now are only going to deepen with that happening. Because I don't think he can sell, whether it's Keon White or some other people on defense or even on offense, his message and vision right now. What's the cost of that? I don't know. Guys will go home after Sunday. But it leads to this, I think, kind of, I don't want to say like a depression in the building, but this ugly feel in the building, even losing aside of like, we're going to do this for a guy that's not even in the building to get a pick that you don't even really care about because you guys aren't good enough and this season sucked.
Yeah.
For the people on the outside, and I am curious what you think about this, how ugly could this be at, say, 1:38 on Sunday afternoon in Foxborough, where the home team fans, let me just lay it out, and I want you to like fill in the gaps. The home team fans want them to lose. I think most of them do.
Right.
Everyone heard or reported on, Jerod Mayo heard the chants, fire Mayo at the end of the game last weekend. Anyone else in that building now is emboldened to do the same after the first freaking punt of the game. Then you have the Bills backups, who are probably more talented than the Patriots starters, and the Patriots don't play their starters. They're at risk of losing again. Yeah. If this is a big deficit and a half-empty stadium cheering fire their head coach, and then you have the hometown fans actively rooting for their team to lose, what kind of black mark is that for the franchise and ownership?
Yeah, and I mean, that's a big thing, is that if you put Joe Milton out there, I think it does lessen the fire Mayo chance. It does lessen the boos. It does lessen everything that might come with it if you're trying as hard as you can in that game and still potentially lose to Mitchell Trubisky and the Bills backups. In some ways, yeah, maybe it is the best thing for Jerod Mayo to even keep his job by putting Joe Milton out there. Honestly, now I'm kind of changing my tune on this because, you probably won't hear as many fire Mayo chants, and at least if you lose in that game, then there's an excuse for it. So I don't know. It's something that Jerod Mayo and Alex Van Pelt and all these guys have to make a tough decision on. I will say that Alex Van Pelt throughout the season has been pretty selfless and has really put the team above himself as far as not putting Drake Maye at risk, waiting to start Drake Maye over Jacoby Brissett. And I could see him doing something similar now in this game, being like, you know what? Let's put Joe Milton out there. Like, if I lose my job, I'll lose my job, but this is what's best for the future.
Okay, so the holidays are dying down. Going back to school, going back to work, no more presents. A little bit of a bummer. I got one last gift for you, courtesy of Prize Picks, where you can win up to 1,000 times your cash by building a lineup between 2 to 6 players on America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. Yes, it's that simple. As always, you go to Prize Picks, you pick a couple of players. Each comes with a stat. When you look at that stat in their next game, you pick more or you pick less if you think that player will get more of that stat or less. You file the lineup away, and for a short time only, you can again win up to 1,000 times your cash. NFL season dying down. Playoffs are around the corner. For me, it's more of an NBA thing. The Celtics stink. I don't care. I've been winning on Pickmas without them. So go to Prize Picks right now, whether you're using MasterCard or Venmo. Venmo's my thing. You can deposit real money and win real money sports action while watching your favorite sports. And as we close in on December, get this, they're still giving away parts of $30+ million in rewards during Pickmas. So what are you waiting for? Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly. $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup at Prize Picks. Prize Picks, run your game. It's a great point about Alex Van Pelt because he was asked right before the Bills game. They run him 4 times, 2 sneaks, 2 zone reads. Like, why don't you just want to run the quarterback who can clearly run? You ran in the preseason and could help an offense that right now needs all the help it can get. And he was like, it's to protect the kid.
Yeah.
And we know Mayo, either through the veiled, you said it, not me, or comments before being like, yeah, I'm on board. Yeah, we should do that. He's a really talented kid. He's got good legs. I love that about him. Wanted that to happen. I would not be surprised if that was directed from the top down, but it's a credit to Alex Van Pelt. It's not because he was nice to the media or he's better speaking to us and more direct. The guy's an adult in a room that is lacking some adults, and that's behind a podium. I think it's in meeting rooms, and he might be the fall guy. I think he will be the fall guy, which brings us to Black Monday. Like, there's going to be change on this staff, and I think we'll find out pretty quickly. If they're consulting with you, though, where do you start and where do you hope to end up? Understanding that if you fire a coordinator, there's a process in hiring, you need some targets. And if you're filling out the staff underneath that, it'll probably be dependent on the coordinator you hire to replace Alex Van Pelt or DeMarcus Cummings, and or even the head coach if you part with Jerod.
So no one feels bad for the Krafts, obviously, because they put themselves in this situation. But I do think that this is a tough decision that they have to make, because I'm going to lay it out. You can't bring back Jerod Mayo, but not Elliott Wolf. I think that, like, you can't fire Elliott Wolf, but bring back Mayo. I don't think that makes sense. You probably can't bring back Wolf, but not bring back Mayo, because there's going to have to be this infrastructure in place with a new head coach and a GM, and you'll have to work together. So that's a tough decision. And you can't bring back DeMarcus Covington, but not Alex Van Pelt, because the defense has been a much bigger issue. It seems like Alex Van Pelt might become the scapegoat here, but there's a lot of things that, like, you can't do this if you're going to do this. You can do it. So I think
let's stay with the Covington thing, though, because I've said someone's going to get a raw deal here, and that includes Jerod. 1 year, new head coach, shitty roster, like you're supposed to lose. This isn't about fair, though. Like, I think they could fire Van Pelt and keep Covington because Jerod just likes him, and if he has a say, he's going to stick with his guy. No.
I don't think you can do it. I think the defense has been so bad. The expectations for the defense were so much higher. This is a unit that everyone was expecting to be top 10 again. They're 30th or whatever it is right now. Yes, they've had injuries, but they have so far underplayed expectations that I don't think you can bring back DeMarcus Covington, but fire Alex Van Pelt. I think you either have to fire both coordinators or bring both guys back. I guess you could bring back Alex Van Pelt, but not DeMarcus Covington. But that doesn't seem like a likely scenario here. I mean, the idea of, like, bringing back DeMarcus Covington, but hiring this, like, senior defensive coach who has head coaching experience to help out the unit. It's like, okay, well, is that going to be a new coordinator, or is that just going to be a guy who's helping out Jerod Mayo and DeMarcus Covington? Because, like, yeah, it would make sense, but this defense has just been so bad top to bottom all season that to bring back the more underperforming coordinator over the guy who's actually helped the offense improve and develop Drake Maye, I don't think you can do it.
Well, I just wonder, like the consequences, like the obstacle there, you would think is merit and logic. And what I'm saying is, if you're an owner, if you're in the NFL, very often these decisions are not made based on merit and logic. It's based on pressure from the fan base and the media. It's based on relationships. It's based on nepotism. And I'm not saying like DeMarcus Covington couldn't make a year two leap. It's just to say that wherever he could be next, same with Jerod Mayo.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to get there in a way that catches up to a theoretical Mike Vrabel and whomever Vrabel's defensive coordinator would want to be, or even a Patrick Graham if Patrick Graham wanted to be here. But then you get into a conversation, you talk about how thorny and complicated this is. I don't know the answer to this question because Patrick Graham left before I came onto the beat here in New England. What if he's a Belichick loyalist? What if he wants nothing to do with Jerod?
Yeah.
And then you're dealing with not only just a tiny pool of people that know the Patriots defense in the system and want to come back here when Jerod's on the hot seat, but also don't have something personal against Jerod because they're close with Bill, who obviously was furious and hasn't spoken to Jerod since. Like and that I say that to underscore your original point of like, this is a brutal position that the Krafts are in. And I would argue, not now, but in a second, they cornered themselves on this.
They did. I think that going back to the fairness question, I think it can create culture issues if you bring back Covington and don't bring back Van Pelt, because I do think that you've got guys in the building being like, how did our guy AVP get fired but not Covington? Like, what the hell is going on here? When you already have guys like Keion White, saying that major changes have to come this offseason. You have other guys like Daniel Aquale and Jonathan Jones speaking out. Like, I think it does. The culture is already an issue. And I think that would only create bigger culture issues. And I think that goes beyond fan base and everything like that. So I think the answer is probably you have to bring back Mayo and Wolf, or you have to clear house. And I know that we haven't really talked about Elliott Wolf or the front office. I mean, I've been steadfast on this. To give a GM 1 year just seems preposterous. I know that that's not what a lot of people believe. I know that there's a lot of people who think that based on what Elliott Wolf did this offseason, he should be fired. But we don't know what this draft class is going to look like in 2 years. They smartly underspent in free agency because it was a bad free agent class. And there was no reason to overpay guys that they didn't want to have be a part of the future to save money for this offseason, next offseason, when they can actually build up their team a little bit better. Draft class looks bad. Certainly had some misses in free agency, but I think that firing a GM after 1 year just puts yourself at risk of becoming those like Browns and Jets and all those other teams that have changeover year after year after year, because like, all right, so what happens if they're bad again next year? So then you fire your new GM too. It's like, when does that stop at that point? So if they had believed in Elliott Wolf last offseason, then I think that you have to continue that belief and believe in him of what this process is. And I think that you could easily say the same thing about Jerod Mayo, but I just think that there's more chances for a head coach to prove himself over a season than there is for an executive or for a GM. So I don't know. I think that I think the options are either bring back both coordinators or get rid of both coordinators. And I think that just with the way the structure is, you almost have to do the same thing with Mayo and Wolf too. Either like bring both guys back or just start over from scratch.
Yeah. To wrap up the Wolf conversation, I think in large part, I agree with you. And I think there are people on the outside going, what are you talking about?
Right. Yeah.
And I understand the frustration. This is nothing personal about Elliott, who, like, full disclosure, I've had conversations with. You read some of his comments to me in a one-on-one before the season and a profile I did on him in March. And in doing that profile, April rather, right before the draft, speaking with several current and former NFL GMs, multiple of both, there's a lot of belief in him around the league. And when the job description in year one is to offload the bad contracts, cut the dead weight on the roster, Juju Smith-Schuster, Devontae Parker, Trent Brown, get out of here. Save money and roll it over into 2025, and there's a better free agent class. Okay, find the quarterback of the future. Yeah, he's had misses in free agency. Yeah, KJ Osborne was brutal. Jalen Polk has been historically bad, as you've documented very well. Javon Baker's been a joke, a guy that was off of some team's draft boards, and you took him in the 4th round. Okay, and Lamakonke was right there, someone I argued for. Every GM misses. Every front office misses. But the only way you learn if they have more hits than misses relative to average GMs is to get a larger sample size.
Yeah.
And this is not an inexperience issue or perhaps an immaturity issue, as far as I know, like it is with Jerod Mayo. 5 years of coaching experience. Elliott Wolf has more than 2 decades in NFL front offices. Doesn't necessarily make him good, but it gives me more reason to believe that if he's charged in year 2 with get good talent, now he has more resources to do so, not to mention the Matthew Judon trade. He, like the rookies he drafted, need more time to figure out what you have there.
Yeah, because I mean, I've always made this point, but like, yeah, what happens if the draft class looks good? It's all in 2 or 3 years from now. Then it's like, okay, well, thanks for Drake Maye, see you the door. Like, thanks for the draft. But I also just don't think that there's like, who do you want as a GM? Is there a guarantee that you're going to get a GM? There's no guarantees as far as general managers go. Like,
well, people would throw names are like, oh, give me the assistant guy in Kansas City. Give me someone assistant GM in Detroit. Like, that's great. But what you're asking for is this abstract idea that could be anything. Like the same thing I wrote about Mayo. It's this potential in your head. They could be better. It's like the backup quarterback. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm going to project all my hopes and dreams onto this empty person or name that hasn't done anything yet, but in my mind will do better than what I've seen, because what I've seen from Wolf has been disappointing. What I would argue is, to a degree, it was supposed to be. And throw in some bad luck and some bad decisions, which we called out in real time with the offensive line, which is a complete failure on his part, replicating Bill Belichick's mistakes. Inexcusable. But aside from that, there's no grounds to be fired here as a GM who's hired for a multi-year job, and we're not even a full year into him having roster control.
It's also, I mean, obviously he had misses in free agency, and I don't want this to become this big, like, defend Elliott Wolf thing or anything, but like, they're not catastrophic misses. Like, KJ Osborne was signed for what, $3 million?
$4 million.
Yeah, these aren't whoops, we signed Kirk Cousins for like $100 million guaranteed or whatever. Now we're screwed for the future. And like
Calvin Ridley. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I don't want to turn this into like a Bill versus Elliott thing, but like near the end of Bill's tenure, like signing Juju Smith-Schuster, you had to subtract cap space to cut that guy. Devontae Parker, like you had to subtract cap space to cut that guy. Like those aren't necessarily catastrophic misses, but they are worse misses than what we've seen so far in free agency from Elliott Wolf. You can talk about some of the re-signings.
Totally.
Like, I don't know. The hope is that Kyle Duggar looks better next season. He's not dealing with like ankle injuries or whatever's going on this year, but like that right now looks like you could potentially have to cut bait and eat some space in the future. We'll see what it looks like next year. No one possibly could have predicted what's going on with Christian Barmore, so I don't really want to touch that one. But like Jabril Peppers, you sign him to a contract extension. Devon Godchaux, you sign him to a contract extension. Those aren't necessarily looking as good as, say, like signing Hunter Henry to his extension or anything like that. But still, you thought you knew what you had in those guys. So it's easier to I don't know. Yeah. But once again, like do whatever you want to do. It's tough to bring back one of those guys and not cut bait completely or bring back both of them.
Yeah. And here's to bring it back to the Krafts, who, again, criticize Elliott Wolf all you want. I think the job was not to build a ready-made roster this year. And there have been whips along the way, and they happen. And look, he could be out of a job because, like I said, it's not all based on merit and logic. Sometimes it's just like they've seen enough and they need to move on. If the Krafts do move on, here's the problem. Congratulations, you just became the Carolina Panthers.
Right. 3
head coaches in 3 years. 3 different front office leaders in 3 years. No continuity, no culture, no semblance of a plan. And that's how they got here in the first place. Like we bitched about Belichick, rightfully so, not having a succession plan. People forget before Tom Brady, where were the tight ends? Like Gronk retires and you have 2 years, the worst tight end play in the league. Brady retires, no succession plan there. He had the Cam Newton experience. Bill Belichick, your succession plan was to write in the contract of a 4th-year assistant, hey, you'll be the guy coming up because we like you, and you spent some time at Optum. And again, Jerod Mayo might become a great head coach one day, but that day is not today. It's not tomorrow. It's not the day after. It's not even going to be next year. And so for the Krafts, who relied on Belichick for so long and everything stemmed from him. The system, the game plans, the personnel evaluation, that it gets so specific. Once you turn over a new leaf to Wolf and Jerod Mayo, they've not replaced anything around them to fill in that infrastructure. Like you and I both know, people from other organizations on the coaching staff and the front office get here and are like, where's all the stuff? Where's all the support staff? How is this? I have how much money to relocate my family sometimes? Like, what's going on here? They need to upgrade themselves. They need to modernize themselves in a way that I thought Jerod Mayo was going to do that. That was way too much to ask for a guy, again, in his 6th season of coaching to do as a head coach. He's learning on the fly. You're not learning as owners. And that's the issue here. You need to upgrade and supply and support your people and develop them in a way that was long the most undersold benefit of having Bill Belichick as your head coach. Josh McDaniels will start as a small assistant. He'll become your offensive coordinator. Brian Flores will be a grunt work and then a defensive coordinator calling a Super Bowl where you allow 3 points. Okay. They're not developing people like that on the coaching staff, in the front office, and they don't have the infrastructure. It's cool. It's actually great. They have a football-only training facility coming up. Here's the problem. That's in 2026 at the earliest.
Yeah.
And right now, you might be starting over with a whole new coaching staff and front office, and you don't have to even take it from me. And this is the last point I'll say. You and I both remember being at the Combine, where we're talking to people around the league, and they're like, what the fuck is going on with the Patriots? And then the NFLPA report card drops out.
Yeah.
29th out of 32 teams. You're the 4th worst franchise in the league, not according to me, not according to Doug, not according to any kind of media or fans, according to your own players. Ownership gets a D. The weight room gets an F. You have F for treatment of families. Those grades told you then and tell you now exactly where this franchise is. And as much as everyone wants to fire Jerod and fire Elliott, fire everybody. Again, I'll say it, it's more scratching an itch than a solution. But right now, you might need to do both if you're going to get anywhere. And whatever you pick, you're in a no-win situation. But the Krafts put themselves there.
100%. Really curious to see what that report card says this year, because I'm expecting it to actually be a little bit higher, just on, Jerod being more of a player's coach. I think they did set up some sort of thing for families.
There's a family room now.
But so
Bring
at
the
least those
GPA
things
up.
won't be like as low, but I don't think the facility, like maybe them announcing that they're going to have this new facility, maybe that improves that grade a little bit. But I think maybe travel gets a little bit higher because I know that some players didn't like having to stay in like, the boonies rather than actual cities. I think they've improved that a little bit, but
The hotel that we were at in Buffalo, where supposedly they used to stay all the time.
they did. Yeah, they did used to stay at the beautiful Buffalo Niagara Marriott or whatever it is. So yeah, I think it might be a little higher, but I don't think it'll be significantly higher. They haven't made like crazy upgrades yet.
No. And look, I'm tired of the blame game. I know I just ranted there about ownership and the infrastructure and their failure to develop people and refurbish the infrastructure. But the point is, blame's on everybody's hands. And it goes for Mayo, it goes for Wolf, it goes for Van Pelt and DeMarcus Covington. And sometimes that doesn't make you feel good at home being like, oh, great, blame everybody.
Yeah.
But there's not a good way out of this because it
No.
took a long while to get here. This is organizational rot. And replacing that with real growth, whether it's Mayo growing in year 2 or Covington or new people or Vrabel or whomever, is going to take time. And it's unfortunate, but that's where they are. And I don't think we missed anything in the process of covering all that. Anything from the last 48 hours that you want to hit on?
I don't think so. Nothing major. Nothing else major, I don't think. It was pretty quiet Sunday. So yeah.
Yeah. I will say this. What'd you make of the locker room? And we haven't talked about Keon White's comments to Karen Gregan, but that's the first mailbag question coming up as we pivot.
Yeah.
What did you just make generally of the locker room and kind of the vibe after that loss?
I mean, it's interesting with Keon White. And like you said, we'll get into it, but like you do wish he'd be a little bit more specific, but I think he is kind of having people read between the lines. The locker room in general, I thought it was a little interesting. Like you saw Jalen Hawkins, Dale Pettis, and Marte Mapu sitting in like a huddle at their lockers for over an hour after the game, which is very uncommon. Just like dissecting, it seemed like everything that happened. Del Pettis told me that he was just asking a lot of questions to 2 older guys. Jalen Hawkins said it was all about them sticking together and, continuing to try and do all that stuff. So I thought that was a really interesting scene in the locker room. You also had Dietrich Wise go up to Jalen Polk about an hour after the game, sit next to him, have a conversation with him in his locker for a longer time. That's a veteran captain talking to a rookie. But then hours later, you've got Jalen Polk posting on Instagram, calling himself the most hated. It's like, unless Dietrich Wise is telling him to do that. And I mean, I'll also say that like Dietrich Wise had a comment criticizing fans for booing. Devon Godshaw had a comment, multiple comments criticizing fans for booing Mayo or for chanting fire Mayo and for booing. So like, I think that kind of goes back to the leadership issue where like those are two of the vets in the locker room and they're being like, hey, we don't deserve to be booed. It's like, you can't really tell the fans what to do. And it also makes you wonder a little bit about what the message from Dietrich Wise to Jalen Polk even is after the game. Especially when Jalen Polk posts like that afterwards. And I do think this team has a major leadership void. Certainly losing Juwan Bentley and David Andrews didn't help, but I think that there still would have been a leadership void in the locker room based on the next guys in line there. I think that I don't know. That's probably my number one takeaway. Devon Godshaw, first comments out of the gate to the media also was, I thought we defended the run well. It's like, they ran for like 150 yards and you guys just like gave up seemingly in the fourth quarter. So like, yeah, maybe you allowed 4 yards per carry or whatever it was, but like, it doesn't mean that you did well when you lost 40-7. So that was kind of a rant, but
no, you took us around. We were by the receivers for a little bit, hung out with the safeties, and then ended up with Devon Godshaw, who just, regardless of how the game went, starts with the run defense because that's what concerns him, and I think is not
paints him in a good light.
It's not super common across the locker room, but it's common enough where you're not going to say splintered in a way that you go back last year and you had Mac Jones guys and you had Bailey Zappi guys, or even 2 years ago. But it's certainly, you do the old cliche 5 fingers or 1 fist. Like there's a lot of guys out for themselves, and it's not unique to the Patriots and being a team that's headed for the number 1 overall pick. It's a bad team, but the guys who have bought in aren't reaping the benefits of that hard work. Like Dietrich Wise told me, I go, hey, what are the stakes of this after the bye week? Last 4 games. What's the stretch? If we finish strong, it says the hard work matters. You're 0-3. 2 of these games were not remotely close.
Yeah.
So it says what's working right now doesn't work. What's happening right now does not work. And the culture reflects that. So last thing, actually, no more last thing. I do have very belated travel tales, which I've never done this with somebody else. But the Buffalo trip, because I promised to deliver what happened in Buffalo, a little behind the scenes from when we landed and everything going around the game. And I think you're going to have good insights into there, starting with a 100-ounce beer tower. But before we get to beer towers in Buffalo, mailbag, here's a Keion White question. Carlos, hey guys, quote, I was interested in hearing your opinion on Keion White's situation. Jerod doubled down on his previous quote, saying that he and Keion are on the same page, but the situation seems weird. Narrator, yes. Quote, do you guys view him as a foundational player in the rebuild? What message will it send out if Jerod comes back and Keion subsequently requests a trade?
I think it's really interesting that now twice, as Carlos mentioned, Jerod Mayo said, I had a conversation with Jerod Mayo, with Keion White. He didn't mean that. It's like, Keion White is such an interesting guy that like I can almost see him meeting with Jerod Mayo and being like, that's not what I meant. And that's just like literally all he says. And like, and not specifying any more about what exactly he did mean by any of it. Because he is kind of a mercurial, that I butchered the pronunciation of that word, mercurial.
It wasn't a Danny Heifetz butchering, but I might cut that for later just for my own kicks.
Yeah, at least I knew how it was pronounced, unlike Danny Heifetz, who just like has no idea how words are pronounced. But you'd like him to be a key part of the rebuild, but heading into the season, I remember having conversations about Keion White being like, are we sure he's going to be this dominant force? Because he wasn't last year. He started off this season well. He's kind of petered out a little bit. He said that he himself is not fully happy with his performance. The Patriots pass rush has been horrendous since the game against the Bears. Midway through this Chargers game, I turned to you and said, I feel like the Patriots haven't had a real sack in like 6 weeks. And I was like, I must be forgetting something. I wasn't. Their fastest sack since their 9-sack performance against the Bears came in 4.4 seconds. That was Christian Barmore sacking Tua Tagovailoa. They've had 3 sacks since that 9-sack performance against the Bears. two of them were Josh Allen and Tua Tagovailoa kind of just like running themselves into sacks. And the third one was Brendan Schooler running off the edge, Tua Tagovailoa scrambling to his left, and Brendan Schooler catching up with him 5 seconds later or whatever it was. Like, they legitimately have not had a real guy in the pocket, stack him in 3 seconds since that game against Caleb Williams. And Caleb Williams is like the worst quarterback in the league in pressure to sack rate. So, of course, that's going to be the game that they actually get after the passer. But Keion White should be the key there. He should be someone who can get after a quarterback in 3 seconds, 3.5 seconds, whatever it is, stack him in the pocket. He's not doing it. No one else is doing it. And I think that it does raise questions about, is Keion White just a rotational player in the future? Is he a strong side end? Like, pass rusher is probably their second or third biggest need right now. Like, you're actually probably getting by better with Mario Douglas, Kayshon Boutte, and Kendrick Bourne than you are with the Patriots' current pass rushers. The Patriots' pass rush is actually worse than their receiving core right now.
I don't think there's enough evidence to claim definitively that Keion White is a foundational player. Like, you would hope that for a second round pick who flashed at times as a rookie and not in a statistical way, and then started this season with 4 sacks in 2 games. And Kyle Shanahan 2 weeks later is like, oh, that 99, we got to look out for him. And yeah, the 49ers blew them out. But Keion says to me, I know I can play good football. It's not happening right now. That has him unhappy. And even some of his comments, again, to me, and he said other things to other people, the major changes one being the one that got the most airtime and attention. But he says to me, like, I've never felt more disconnected. That's a word he used. Or less on the same page than I do right now. I said, disconnected from what? He says, well, that's what I got to figure out. So, like, there's this vagueness here that either he's playing this long game and trying to lead you on, but only to a certain point, then you got to figure out the rest, or he's just lost. Either way, it's a problem. And there is something to a guy in his mid-20s who's just got to figure out how to be better at his job, like all of us, okay? He's not blameless here. And there's certainly an eagerness for people to hear criticism of the coaching, because that's all we want to do now is just fire away at Jerod and everyone on staff. But it should be better than this, is my point. And it's not. And that's a reflection on coaching, reaching him as a player. And I asked him straight up, I was like, hey, how's the rest of your life? Because, like, feeling disconnected is kind of a depressive suggestion, right? Mm-hmm. You feel isolated, right? He's like, my mental health is good. Like, I'm having a ball outside the facility. It's when I come in here that I have a problem. So, again, I don't think there's enough that he's a foundational player, but the fact that Jerod says twice we're on a good page and Keion White says, no, I meant what I said.
Yeah.
That's the disconnect between Keion White and his head coach.
Yeah.
All right.
And I mean, I'll also say about Keion White, like, Keion White didn't talk to anyone last year. Like, he basically didn't talk to teammates last year. So, like, to hear him be like, I'm disconnected in here, I think so. Like, some of these things are Keion White's personality, and I think that obviously you can still be a very good player with a distinct personality, but he does have a distinct personality, and I credit him for saying these things out loud. Though, like, even if he is going to be vague, at least express his feelings about these things.
Yeah, and there's also, I think you could make a case that when Daniel Akwali tells me in London, some guys in here think too highly of themselves. He could be on that list. People talk about other players playing selfish, as Devon Gotcha has said. Keion White can make that list. Like, he should not be the person that you just trust to be a reliable, accurate narrator of events in the Patriots locker room, because he's saying things that you would want to hear as an angry fan.
Yeah.
Just put them in context. It doesn't mean they're all wrong. It doesn't mean they're all right. We can parse through this and be like, this is likely what it means. And he also is taking accountability, which builds some credibility in his comments. Like, you're not going to blame the guy who's, saying, oh, it starts with me, but it's more complicated than he's making it sound. Even if for the most part he's right, there are things that we could tweak here. Anyway, I want to remind the good folks that I think we're still going to do this with longtime listener Nick Roy, who has 2 tickets to Sunday's game. If you want to boo, if you want to cheer, if you just want to go see Joe Milton throw the ball out of the stadium, we might be able to make that happen for you here in the Pats Interference Podcast if you donate to the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. If you don't get those tickets and you would have said rather go to a game next year, or if you want to go to a Celtics game, you want to go to a Bruins game, you want to go to a concert, and you might see Doug there, go to Game Time, because Game Time is the best secondary ticket marketplace you'll find anywhere. The lowest price guaranteed on every single ticket they sell. You don't have to look anywhere else. Just go to Game Time, because even if you do find somehow miraculously a price that's lower than you find on Game Time, they credit you 110% of the difference. But just skip that and just go to Game Time anyway, because they give you all-in pricing. seat views, game time picks, which says, hey, here's the deal. Here are our best deals. Let's be honest, right up front, all in one place, less than 60 seconds. You can find 2 tickets, 4 tickets, 6 tickets, 10 tickets to wherever you want to go with Game Time checkout, and they're all yours. So stop wasting time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use this is the best part. Code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. You can create an account, redeem code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Question number 2. This made me laugh. Manolo. Hey, Andrew. The Pats are currently sitting on $161 million in cap space. I've not verified that number. Realistically, how much of that could be converted into funding for a space program that builds a rocket capsule to fire the offensive line directly into the sun? Thank you.
Yeah, I think a lot. Yeah, maybe they could get NASA on the phone and see what they can do. I don't know. The cap space thing is it's huge, and like between the cap space and potentially having the number 1 overall pick in the league, like I think someone has this like formula for like the most off-season value that you can have heading into like the Patriots would be far and away there right now because there's no team in the league who has 2 first-round picks right now. So like having the first overall pick is far and away the most valuable in the draft, and then they also have the most cap space. So yeah, I mean, if there's any team that can improve their roster as much as possible this year, it is definitely the Patriots. I think a lot of that has to be invested in the offensive line, but also in the wide receivers. Like I said, also in edge defenders. You don't know what Christian Barmore's future holds, so defensive tackle is up there as well. There are so many needs on this team. I don't think that you can actually address all of them, even if you do have $130 million in cap space in the number 1 overall pick, but it does go a long way toward addressing those needs to the fact that maybe you could finish next season with 7 wins or 8 wins. You know, you're not going to be a Super Bowl contender yet, but I think that you can improve quite a bit.
So the 2 names to know for agency, which this is not what Manolo asked, but T. Higgins and Ronnie Stanley are the 2 names in it. Ronnie Stanley, left tackle for the Ravens, far and away the best offensive tackle available. T. Higgins, the far best receiver, which reminded me that after Saturday's game, when Devon Gotcha was at home, presumably wherever he was, just tweeting in all caps T. Higgins. Like, I get that there's some sort of engagement to cultivate there and win over some fans who might be upset with your post-game comments. But man, that looks shitty for your teammates. And granted, there's no good case for the Patriots receivers this season. He's right to want T. Higgins. Everyone on that team should want T. Higgins. It's just a bad thing optically, where either it doesn't care or doesn't know, and either it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. Let's move on. No, that also $161 million, not enough, I would guarantee you, without knowing a single thing about space or building spaceships to send a person into space. It's going to be more.
It's also a lot of weight, an entire offensive line. Thousands of pounds.
Would you believe that when I was covering college, Rose Bowl, actually, Penn State, USC, great game, Saquon, Chris Godwin, Juju Smith-Schuster, a bunch of NFL pros, Sam Darnold, that I watched USC's offensive line at the time board an escalator in this sparkling, super expensive hotel where they were hosting media availabilities. Once everyone got on, the thing stopped. The escalator turned into stairs because it couldn't bear all that weight. Mind you, do you remember, and you probably do, remember Zach Banner?
Yeah. Yo, he was huge. Lincoln Kennedy's son.
Yeah. 6'8", 370, 380.
Yeah, like 380.
Super nice guy.
Yeah.
But anyway, actually stop. There's a tweet somewhere you can find it. No one wants to do that. Kurt, who I had some good suggestions last week in the radio, and I was offering up, hey, if you get a good, thoughtful question, respectful question for Jerod Mayo, I might use that question. He had some good suggestions. The timing was just off. But Kurt, we answer your question now. Quote, we all know this roster has a lot of room for improvement. Do you think Elliott Wolf has the ability to close with upcoming free agents? And will the Krafts overspend to assist in landing those free agents?
Yeah, I think Elliott Wolf himself has the ability to close. I think that the issue is, are players going to want to come here? Like, I guess, and that's part of closing, but you've got Drake Maye. But I was just looking at some of the free agents this offseason, and like one of the top free agent edge defenders is Khalil Mack. It's like, Khalil Mack just saw this firsthand, what this looks like in New England. Is he really going to be banging down the door to play for Jerod Maye on this team? Khalil Mack's probably a guy who's hoping to win a Super Bowl. That's not going to happen in the next year, probably 2 with the Patriots. So it's an uphill climb to get free agents to want to come here. I do think the Patriots will be willing to overspend for guys though, because they have to.
Yeah.
That's the reality of the situation. And quite frankly, they have the cap space to do it. They need to spend this cap space on someone. They need to hit the cash floor over the next 2 years. And I know, like, Robert Kraft knows the optics of if they come back into this next season with like, we've got $70 million to carry over in cap space. Like, it's going to look really bad. So they are going to spend this money. They are going to have to overpay. And I think they're going to be willing to overpay to get these guys. And they were willing to pay a lot of money for guys like Brandon Ayuk and Calvin Ridley. Like, didn't work out last offseason. This offseason, it has to work out. And yeah, I mean, I think Elliott Wolf has the ability to close, but you really do need someone out there pitching guys as well as possible and recruiting and doing it as best as you can to get these guys to come at top dollar and to not want to go to a better team with a better foundation and a better infrastructure.
And that was the biggest issue with Ridley and Ayuk, right? Everyone's like, oh, you can't close, you can't get the big name receivers. Well, Ayuk didn't want to come here. Also didn't end up getting traded. Okay. So that's not an entire sure thing that was going to happen. And Ridley wanted to go to Nashville and play for a team that had been better, was more talented, paid him more money, and certainly had a better tax situation. So forget the whole Krafts snafu of girlfriend versus wife didn't want to come here, yada, yada. Like, I get that you could paint that as Elliott Wolf not closing, but if he does, you're paying Calvin Ridley like $27 million instead of the 22, 23 that he got. Right. I'm with you. I do think they will overspend because you have to. They did it also, people forget, less than 4 years ago, set the freaking record for spending in free agency in a big way. And their argument that this was like somehow taking advantage of a market inefficiency because the cap had come down and we had more space was bogus. It was a bad PR pitch. But the bottom line is they spent real cash in a real way. And when we say the word overpay, as Kurt did, that's not a good thing though. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you're not extracting value from that. And at this point, as I said before, the Patriots can't be picky. But anyway, I'm with you. I think they will spend.
Obviously, you have to spend money on the right people, and that's what the Patriots have tried to do. That's what they tried to do last offseason. But like, the cap is going to keep going up. Like, if you give a ton of money to T. Higgins, it's not going to look that bad 2-3 years down the line when wide receivers are making even more than that. So I actually don't hate the idea of overpaying because at some point the value is going to go up anyway on these guys.
Yeah. All right. Let's breeze through these last couple and then do Buffalo really quickly. Evan, quote, why do you think we aren't seeing Javon Baker and Jalen Polk getting in as many snaps and reps in the last couple of games? So much negativity surrounding Polk, most hated, but I feel like the lack of reps isn't helping his development.
Because they're not as good as the other wide receivers. And like, they each got targeted in this game against the Chargers. Neither guy caught a pass. They were both on the field late in the game. Neither one caught a pass. I don't know. I really try not to be so low on Jalen Polk and Javon Baker because like they're rookies and maybe they can't improve. But like, I wrote 26 days ago about Jalen Polk's struggles and about how he was having a historically bad year and like cited all these stats that he was either last in or like super low in. Since December 4th, when I wrote that story, Jalen Polk has not caught a pass. So all of those things are now worse than they were when I wrote that story because he's been targeted twice since I wrote that. Still hasn't caught a pass. So his catch rate's down. His yards per route run is down. All of these things are even lower than they were almost a month ago. And I mean, Javon Baker hasn't caught a pass yet. The expectations were lower for him as a 4th round pick, but he's also the same guy who said that he get your popcorn ready. I make people in wheelchairs stand up, and he hasn't caught a pass yet. So
they stink. They stink, I think is the answer, right? Javon Baker's target was on a slant, backside slant, one-on-one. We're going to clear space, put everyone on the opposite side of the formation, just win on the slant. Couldn't do it. And Jalen Polk has 2 catches since Halloween. To your point about not since December 4th, which I'm glad you clarified. I was like, how do you know that was 26 days ago that you wrote that story? But they stink right now. So they can't rely on Drake looking at them and knowing they'll be in the right place and do the right thing. I'll also note, this has happened 2 weeks in a row now. Jalen Polk goes out there for some random 3rd down snap, and they run a simple all curls play. Like the stuff they're being handed still this late in the season has to be so simple. Go downfield, stop right after you cross the 3rd down marker, turn around. That's the stuff that they're doing, and it's still not working. Jay Tuck. This
Oh,
question I
one
didn't
more
know if
thing
it
on
was
Polk.
totally.
One more thing on
Yeah, yeah.
Polk. I know, like, this is all retrospect. I probably should have said this better. Like, this is all in hindsight. But like, I was a big University of Washington fan last year. Overall, I like the Jalen Polk pick in the second round. He was a second round, like he was a projected second rounder. Yada yada yada. Like Jalen McMillan's having a lot of success with the Buccaneers right now. I think he just caught 2 more touchdowns. Like when all 3 of those guys were healthy last year, Rome Odunze and Jalen McMillan were better than Jalen Polk. So Jalen McMillan had a bunch of injuries last year. He had an ankle injury, missed half the season. He was kind of a slot only guy, but like it's not shocking to see Odunze and McMillan playing better than Polk. There's no part of me that thought the Polk would have 87 yards at this point with the amount of playing time that he's had.
Do you ever think Vidarian Lowe would have more catches than Javon Baker?
What's that? Since Halloween or since December,
season.
since January? oh, then Javon Baker. No. Yeah, I thought you said Jalen Polk, but yeah, no part of me.
All right, like I said, this next one, not sure if it was totally in good faith, but I think it's a quickly good to explore. Quote, this is dramatic. As the ashes continue to smolder in the end of the dynasty, not smoldering, it's dead, it's dark, it's been like peed on by everyone else in the NFL. What do you think the local Patriots and Boston media will look like in a year or two? A lot of wagons were hitched to their success.
I don't think it's going to look that different. I mean, Patriots are still number one interest as far as the 4 major sports. Football is always going to be number one. And like, quite honestly, like it's been how many years of this now at this point? Like Patriots haven't won a playoff game since 2019 and nothing has dramatically changed. I guess some companies have changed a little bit, but I don't know. I don't see a whole lot changing. And interest currently right now is like higher than it's been all season. So sometimes losing isn't the worst thing for business.
Yeah, and it leads to more interest in the offseason, which you could say this broadly about the whole country. Like the NFL is the biggest show in show business, in entertainment, right? I've called it an American addiction, football. So that's not changing. Locally, that dynasty forever changed this region to being a football, not just town, but as I said, region, like the whole Northeast. So as bad as the Patriots are, the Celtics just won a title. People still find them boring, even though they lose and like kind of play with their food now. People are not going to Red Sox games as often, and the Bruins are stuck in the NHL, kind of like 4 sibling in a family of 4. So
Yeah.
I would also say separate from this, like you said it hitched the wagon to the success. I think Michael Holley, you want to go back early dynasty, Tom Curran, Mike Reese, like those guys are just excellent at what they do, independent of what they cover. And I think there are a lot of really good people on the beat. So this is not like, palling around with the media, but Michael Holley's a New York Times bestseller. Mike Reese is as good as a beat writer there is in the country. And Tom is wildly talented, funny, and good at what he does. So yeah, they would be anywhere that's independent of Bill and Tom and whomever else. So 3 more, and then travel tales, and we'll get out of here. Patriots report. What do you make of Caden Wallace at right tackle and Jalen Polk and Javon Baker's reps towards the end of the game? Obviously, limited sample size, but I'm just hoping for any glimmer of development and knowing what you have and don't have going into next season.
Unfortunately, it's like a little bit too little too late with Caden Wallace, where like plays a couple drives at the end of this game. Hopefully you see him start in week 18, but like, I don't know how much you can really bank on from 1.25 games at right tackle for the future. Like, I don't know. Like, I think you still have to add some. I guess it helps that you could potentially still move Oweno to right tackle. So maybe you don't need to address right tackle this offseason because you hope that Caden Wallace can do it. If he can't do it, then you've still got Mike Owenu and you have enough depth at guard. But yeah, I think that you definitely would have liked to have seen like 10 games of Caden Wallace at right tackle play solid football to know that you had that assurance in the future at right tackle.
Yeah, it's too little to say. I don't think anything last Saturday is going to change my view of their season. I don't think anything on Sunday is going to change my view of the season. It's disappointing broadly, but also in the way that if Caden Wallace had just been left at one position, and I understand you want to cross-train some guys, and that's a new offensive line, and you've got injuries and decisions to make, and they're not always easy. But if you want a third-round rookie to play one of the most difficult positions in all of football, let him focus on one position. They haven't done that. He got hurt, only recently regained his full playing weight and strength, as he told me the other day in the locker room.
Yeah.
It's just too little. And what we've seen from Polk and Baker, again, like we talked about, is not good. Miserable Pats fan. Is there a possibility of the Patriots getting penalized for tanking if we start Joe Milton? My answer is no.
No, like I said earlier, there's enough of a case to do it as far as like you gotta see what you have in the future there. That no, I don't think they would get penalized for that.
All right. Pyramid the podcast. Cool. Time machine. That's how this starts. We go back to the start of the season. I tell you that by the end of the year, Drake Maye is undoubtedly awesome and shows flashes of being elite. We, meaning the Patriots, end up with the number 1 overall pick and still have more than $130 million in cap space to spend. Are you happy?
I mean, I guess, but like it takes out way too much context of the season because like, yeah, you're happy with that. And like I said, you have value this offseason, undoubtedly with the number 1 overall pick and a bunch of cap space, but to not know if you have the answers at your head coach, your coordinators, the front office, all of these things, like those are major issues. So like, yes, there are absolutely things to be happy about, but, and like looking at that in a vacuum, yeah, you're happy, but this doesn't exist in a vacuum and you can't be fully happy with what's going on based on what transpired this season. And I know that the Patriots, wind up 3-4 wins, whatever it is. That's about what they were projected to start the season. But it takes out even more context of all of those wins were in the first half to middle of the season. They're going to end with a giant losing streak. And they have not improved from week 1 to week 18, or at least week 1 to week 17. They looked better in week 1 than they did in week 17. And that's a major problem.
And as our pal Chris Mason wrote, tell me what the Patriots are good at.
Right.
The answer is nothing. That upsets me. And this, like, I think the question comes from a place of perspective. And that's something that, even media, self-included sometimes, can lose. When you get so into the weeds and dive into the details of a season, what's happening week to week, and what does this game mean? What are the trends? What could happen next? Yada, yada. You zoom out. Yeah, Drake Maye being great is a huge, huge development. Pillar of the program, whoever is around to coach it, lead it, mold it, whatever. Cap space is good. I want to know, though, if the Patriots can be good at anything, because everything around Drake Maye has not only just been below average, it's been below expectation. Right. And that's a key part to me. It was not a high bar to start the season. But even with that, it's gone below. And that speaks to coaching, talent, direction, culture, all this stuff we've been talking about for months. So I get it. I do think that's a useful framework, but it leaves out too much context, as you said. Okay, so Buffalo. This is the part where if you want to jump off, this is pretty much the end of the football talk. But I promise to take everyone on the road with us. And this usually starts with you very graciously picking me up. This is 2 weekends ago now. Travel Tale segment before Christmas at my apartment. We go to Logan. We get into the weeds on this, flight's delayed, whatever, we're hanging out. We have like me, you, the 2 camera guys from NBC, Glenn and Moose, Mark Daniels, Chris Mason, just like bullshitting, talking about the team. And some guy was like, "You guys work for a radio station?" We're like, "No, we just can't separate work from life." And here we are boarding an airport, get on the plane, watching the first of the semifinal games. This is when the college football playoff started. And we land, go to a place called Wingnuts, of course, ends with a Z, right next to our hotel. And Great. As I teased, well, tell me what you thought of Wingnuts, because I forget the Z. This was an A+ to me.
Yeah, it was really good. And I think I had a realization, not to go too far into this, but like I had a realization of why wings are so much better in Buffalo, because I genuinely think they are. Like, I think Duff's is really great. I think Wingnuts was great. I think every wings place I've had is great. And then like I get home and like either the local place or like I got like wings from like Pizonis or something. It's just like the expectation is so much higher and the competition is so much greater in Buffalo that you have to have good wings. You have to be able to step up against these other places. Otherwise, no one's going to go to you. And that competition, that expectation does not exist in Massachusetts, where like, even I know people love Buffs in Newton. It just, to me, is nowhere near as good as the best places in Buffalo.
Yeah. So we go out with the Mass Live guys staying at our hotel. Mind you, that hotel just, I don't know, molded in my image of like hotel heaven, in that you have this giant gym. You've got Diet Mountain Dew in the cooler. There's actual single Uncrustables that are next door. And yes, I might be a 12-year-old and a 33-year-old's body checking in this hotel. We We get in, go to Wingnuts, and we're like, all right, we'll have a little bit here. We're watching the games. I think it was Texans Chiefs, and then there was the Steelers Ravens was on after that, and we're getting ready to check out. We have a little bit of food. We're going to go into town a little bit later, and Mark spots someone walk by with this, I don't know, 2.5 foot cylinder, and it's clear except for the part it's filled with some kind of beer. And the waitress walks behind me. And he's like, what the hell was that? Gets up out of his seat, walks around the corner into the other room. I go, that was a beer tower. So I said, all right, well, here we go. And split that mostly with him. Granted, you're driving. We would never risk anything like that. We got an Uber. We're going to town. But Wingnuts, if you got an afternoon to kill, grab a beer tower. And we threw that down. Probably the best wings of my life, by the way. Nice recommendation
really
from our guy, Matt Perino at Syracuse.com, upstate New York, in the New York version of Mass Live. You split then to meet with friends. We go to Dinosaur Barbecue. Excellent spot. Enjoyed there. There's an Irish pub called the Banishee next door, which just goes to prove, as I always say, I don't care if you're in Spain, Siberia, South Africa, or Buffalo. There's always an Irish pub, and it always feels like home. And I was so glad to be there. We end up, because I went to bed earlier that night. I don't know if it, what it was. Maybe the wings are just the half of a 100-ounce tower of beer. There was one last spot, though, called Detour. And this was a bar that Chris Mason discovered he had been to last year with our guy, Dakota Randall, who was like just aficionado when it comes to espresso martinis. And that's what this bar was supposed to be, a kind of a martini bar. I just wanted to watch the end of the UConn women's basketball game because we're bouncing around downtown Buffalo. First of all, when he discovers they had been there the year before, he finds that Dakota, big into these espresso martinis, was disgusted with the quality of it. And I'm looking around at the back of the bar, and I'm seeing like the high end of this is the stuff that used to get me excited in college. Like someone walks into the house with a bottle of Grey Goose and it's like, that guy is the man. And then I look around, I'm like, these are mostly kids who are probably just out of college. And then you have like the recent divorcees who are like trying to get back into the swing of things. And I'm like, I don't really want to be here. I do want to see the end of this game, which UConn ended up losing. And then it got to the point of, I think I'm going to go home. So Chris and Mark were disappointed with their drinks. I leave. They go on, then find out the place they went to after last year, as they're searching around the block and they have a picture and they're looking around, actually burned down the next bar they had been to and loved so much. So I don't know what happened in Buffalo in the 12 months from last year to this year. I like downtown Buffalo a little bit more than I expected, save for that disappointing detour last stop before we had a 425 game, very thankfully, the next day. And I don't know, that was my Buffalo experience.
Yeah, I guess fun fact, not that fun fact, but a fact about that bar burning down. It was set fire by a man named John W. Burns, which is fitting for an arsonist. I guess he worked there, said like, I'm going to burn this place down, and 15 minutes later burned it down. So very unfortunate for that bar in Buffalo, but you have to see the irony or the I don't know, John Burns for an arsonist. That's
it's got dark and unfunny in a second. It's my fault, but yeah.
I went to a place called Founding Fathers, which was a like presidential and history themed bar with, like you said, a couple of friends, a couple of Bills beat writers, which was interesting. The bartender there goes around like yelling trivia questions at people who are sitting around, and it was voted like the 18th best bar in the country in like 2016 or something like that. And they're very proud of this fact. And there's like posters all over the world being like, we're the 16th best in 2016. So that was fun. But yeah, I enjoy Buffalo. It's very chill there. Very easy to get in and out of the airport. I know a lot of people don't like the Buffalo trip every year, but I'm for it. I think it's fun every year.
Big time for it. I'll say this too, because their new stadium is going to go up in 2026. If it's a warm weather game or you just don't care about the cold, I would say make the trip. Like I did that as a kid growing up, rooting for the Patriots once. And it was, I think it was the first road game they won that year. It's 2009 season. But it's literally underground. You walk into kind of the first, or they're like the concourse level. And then if you have a lower seat, you're going down into it. Then there's the field. It's very homey. It's in the middle of a neighborhood separate from the city, like in Orchard Park. You'll see the stadium being built next door. And it's just everything you want and like a very raw football experience. Separate from that, best candy bar in the press box in the entire league. And a little problematic when you're kicking around, wasting time before a 425 kick. But yeah, it's a closer game. We had good things to say about it afterward. Didn't do a full breakdown of that one either, but yeah, recommend the Buffalo trip.
They have Swedish Fish, Sour Patch Kids, and peanut M&Ms, which is just a pretty deadly combination.
And some
popcorn.
Reese's Pieces, which I tweeted in honor of our fallen soldier there.
Yes.
So
Mike
Reese made it back for the next game. Thank you for spending overtime here. It is going to be a wild week, and hopefully a happy new year to everyone listening and watching. I believe, fingers crossed, we will have a current Patriots player later on next week, not just for a 4-minute drill, which resulted in Mike Giardi naming Taylor Kyles as the person he would most likely hit every day. Not a media feud. We had some good laughs on Saturday rather. Anyway, Patriots player on for the entire episode. Stay tuned for that. And then who the hell knows? Next week, Black Monday. But Andrew sits by himself, drinks alone, talks to himself, is coming back. In the meantime, thank you, Doug.
Yep, absolutely.